Stacy Savage here, aka the Texas Trash Talker, coming at you from Austin. I'm founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies, an environmental consulting firm. We help businesses reduce waste and increase profit. So welcome to episode 7 of Environmental News, the good, the bad, the ugly. Today we're deep diving into 3 big picture themes reshaping America's sustainability landscape. Number 1, recycling and repair. Number 2, restaurant food waste. And number 3, legislation and enforcement. So here's how it works. For every topic, we've got a good story to inspire you, a bad story to warn you, and then an ugly one that you need to know that you might be able to help out on. So stick around until the end. I've got a free checklist that I'll put in the social media post where you're finding this video. There's a link to it. And then I'll have announcements about my new Kindle book for zero waste families, a LinkedIn newsletter that you can sign up for, and my new Substack community. So let's roll. So topic 1, recycling and repair. The good news about this is that repair cafes are being reignited, kind of like fix-it clinics, if you will, in Syracuse, New York. So on May 10th of this year, Syracuse hosted its first repair cafe at Lemoyne College, where volunteers kind of rewrote the narrative by fixing several broken items. People brought 24 broken items to this repair clinic, and they were able to fix over 19 of them. So everything from lamps to apparel, this is kind of a resurgence that comes after local repair shops were closed during the pandemic. And that left residents with very few options, but just to toss out broken goods. So by restoring items, these cafes cut landfill waste and they teach sustainability in a hands-on way. One thing to think about is how in the older generations, maybe the boomer generation or even the generation before, the silent generation, they were full of tinkerers, right? So people would just repair things without even thinking about it. These days, it's chuck it and get a new one. But what this does is with these repair clinics is kind of combat what's called planned obsolescence. That's where companies kind of bake into the recipe or the business model for things to break very quickly after you've bought them. So if you think about items that were bought maybe back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, how they usually lasted quite a while. I mean, myself, I had a television whenever I graduated high school, moving into college. For my birthday, I got a TV, and that thing lasted me 17 years. It went from apartment to apartment. And by the time I was 34, 35 years old, then I finally had to get a new TV because it just conked out on me, right? So you don't really find TVs that can last that long. So that's just an example of where these kind of repair clinics or fix-it clinics are being utilized to combat planned obsolescence. And so, they're really now teaching these sustainability tactics to the local community in a very hands-on way, like I said, but now they're planning these for monthly events and training workshops to keep that momentum going. So in the bad category of reuse and repair and recycling, California has expanded its plastics ban, but recycling infrastructure still falling behind. So back in June of this year, California banned single utensil cups, food containers, any of those kind of single-use plastics in order to reduce pollution. But despite those kind of ambitious policy goals, recycled content in remaining packaging remains below 15%. So many rural communities still lack consistent recycling collection or processing. And the disconnect is really highlights an expanding plastic-free mandate without the recycling systems needed to support it statewide in California. So activists are now calling for recycled content requirements and grants that would improve rural infrastructure. So what I mean by that is think about you throw something away or you recycle it, right? And it's a plastic item, but that can be broken down and remade into a new item, a new product. So we want to have items or products that have recycled content in them already. So it's made out of the stuff that you recycled previously. So even though there are these single-use plastic bans, there's not really any infrastructure set up that would require recycled content being used to make the new products that you find on your store shelves. And so that's what Californians are really pushing back. It's kind of cart before the horse, if you will. And again, many rural communities don't have the proper, curbside services or even drop-off locations in their local communities. So that's really concerning. It's a good effort. It's a good idea, but I think behind it all, there's really not much structure there to support it. And I think they're probably going to have to go back to the drawing board in some way, because they're not going to be able to meet their goals as a state for recycled, keeping single-use plastics out of landfill. So moving on to the ugly in this category of recycling and reuse and repair, Philadelphia sanitation strike is paralyzing recycling. I don't know if y'all have heard about the Philly sanitation workers going on strike very recently. I'm talking like late last week. This is very, very, very relevant information. So since July 1st, over 9,000 sanitation and recycling workers in Philadelphia have just walked off the job after the mayor took a 9% pay raise, while the staff was kind of capped at 3%. So these workers obviously know their worth. Our sanitation workers are not just trash guys, right? They keep our community moving. They keep our community safe and sanitary, and they keep those kind of the odors down and the rodents away, and all of that they bring to the table as far as unionized workers. Many of them are unionized, and they obviously know their worth. So as trash and recyclables are just piling up in the streets and sidewalks and local parks, they've actually told their residents to bag up the trash and the recycling that they already pay for. They're paying a monthly fee as residents to get curbside pickup. So not only do they have to pay the fee for no service, they then have to bring their their materials down to a local park, or closed schoolyards where kids are off for the summer, right? So I just think that's completely ridiculous. So there's drop-off centers for the overflow, but the city is facing not only sanitation, but very strong public health risks. So this crisis just stems from decades of underpaying critical labor deemed kind of invisible. And community leaders are really urging that city officials renegotiate fair wages or just risk complete system collapse. And Philly is a huge city. They've got a lot of tourism, even, just regular restaurants or hotels create massive amounts of waste on a daily basis. So this is, it's been just a couple of days where all of this is piling up. And so I really hope that very soon they can find a resolution, because residents and businesses, tourists don't deserve to be paying for these services, not receiving those services. And those workers deserve fair wages. They deserve benefits and to be treated properly as city employees. So I'm standing firm with the workers. So moving on to topic 2, which is restaurant food waste. We kind of alluded to that in the last section, about how much food waste that restaurants and hotels actually create on a daily basis. So in our good topic for this, or in our good story for this topic of restaurant food waste, Too Good to Go, which is an app, has launched in Pittsburgh. So on May 21st of this year, the popular food rescue app Too Good to Go launched in Pittsburgh, which partners with around 50 restaurants and grocers at this time. Of course, they're looking to onboard more restaurants and grocers to kind of build out their platform in that local area. But the app sells kind of what's called surprise bags containing surplus food. So it turns potential waste into lots of value and cuts landfill-bound meals. Historically, for retailers, they've had very little incentive to prevent overproduction, but this type of tech really connects the supply directly with the demand, and it lowers costs because of that instant connection there. So local governments are now offering tax incentives to expand that platform into more outlets, more food outlets as well. So moving on to the bad. The bad in this category of food waste is that food delivery is still being fueled by single-use plastics. So as of July 1st, there was an expose that revealed that even when customers request no plastic in like the notes section of food delivery app platforms, whoever's packing up the bags at that restaurant, or whoever is bringing the food to the person, is still just jamming it full of single-use plastic containers and the cutlery and the little condiment packets and everything that you really don't need because it's coming to your home, or maybe it's being delivered to your office and you already have that stuff. So whenever there is a little check mark on the app that says, I don't need any delivery cutlery or condiments or anything like that, you can check that. But even if you do, a lot of times they're going to just pack it with that same stuff because they're not paying attention to the way that you want your order packed. Unfortunately, they're just, slamming everything in there so it can get out of their way, essentially. And believe me, I worked in restaurants for 9 years. I understand what it means to pack up to-go orders that are, 12 tickets long, and you've got a lot to do. You don't want the food to get cold, and you just kind of throw everything into a box. But now with these food delivery apps, I just think that there needs to be more training for those who are actually packing up the delivery orders as well. So there needs to be paying more attention to the details on each individual ticket for that pickup and delivery. So, consumers around this, they really crave the convenience, but there is very little infrastructure to support, keeping those single-use plastics out of your order, or composting, or cleaning and returning reusable packaging. So this practice stems from a service-first industry model that hasn't really caught up with the green expectations of the customer base. So now nonprofit organizations and cities are coming together to press the delivery giants to institute kind of reusable container take-back programs where they can be piloted in different communities in order to see if it would work, to see if reusable containers would work instead of getting your styrofoam or those containers that are more rigid plastics. Is if it's something that could be returned back to the institution or the business that is making the food, then that would cut down on a lot of the plastic waste out there. And of course, there would have to be protocols and strategies around how do you wash it, how do you sanitize it, how do you make sure that it gets back to the right restaurant. But if they could do this in an app to get food to your door, they can also get the return process on the back end instituted as well. Of course, it's going to take some research and development around that. But if there's a fee involved, something that would help incentivize the company to go the extra mile for those consumers that want to be more responsible for their containers. So, moving on to the ugly story in the food waste category is that 31% of US food is wasted while 35 million Americans go hungry. So in 2023, US food systems, we as a country produced 74 million tons of waste, which is 31% of all food that's been produced, while 35 million Americans, including 10 million children, have faced food insecurity. So this disparity comes from inefficiencies in supply chains, overproduction, and poor coordination between the producers and the food banks that can kind of rescue the food. So experts really argue that waste is baked into the system. It's kind of a design flaw in a business model, is the waste piece of it. So it's preventable, but it's perpetuated by a lack of policy and investment. So advocacy groups are now pushing for stronger food rescue legislation and what's called farm to food bank initiatives. So if most businesses, if they have a food permit, a lot of times they're still stuck in that 1980s mentality, early 90s mentality of, if I donate food and someone gets sick, then they're going to sue me for, I'll face legal consequences. And that's just not the case. So thanks to the 1996 Good Samaritan Act, all U.S. businesses can donate foods that are consumable by humans in good faith, kept to proper time and temperature standards through the health code, of course. And, you can't donate rotten food. You can't donate, foods that really have already expired. It has to be in conjunction or in partnership with a food redistribution nonprofit that's trained to handle foods in a proper way, to make sure that we keep that bacteria, airborne pathogens, foodborne pathogens, anything like that to a minimum, so that people aren't getting sick. But there was a big scare back in the mid 80s, early 90s about food donations and being sued because you want to donate food to the community. So that's no longer the case. It's been no longer the case for, 30 years now, almost. So, but many food permitted businesses still operate like they would get in trouble if they did donate food. And so all you really have to do is to find a local food bank or some kind of food redistribution nonprofit. There's also food redistribution apps out there like Goodr, Goodr. And they operate, where on the blockchain you can see kind of when your foods were picked up, where they went. You get a manifest, you get all your tax documents, because remember, the IRS will give you up to 15% fair market value for any of the foods that you do donate. So you can reap the benefits of food that might have gone to the landfill dumpster. You can recoup your expenses. Not only that, you're diverting that food from landfill dumpsters to feed hungry people in your community. And not only that, on top of that, you can use that for green marketing strategies to kind of elbow out the competition in your food industry in your local area. So it's a win-win-win all the way around. But yeah, that's one thing to consider if you own a food business, or if you know someone who does, is make sure that they're donating their unwanted or excess foods. So let's move on to topic number 3, which is legislation and enforcement. Now, the good in this topic, legislation and enforcement, the good story is that Baytown won a $14.25 million clean air verdict. This is in Texas. And very close to where I grew up outside of Houston. So I'm like, yes, because I grew up under the brown, hazy skies and rotten egg smells of the Texas oil and gas industry. And so this is immediately, something that perked me up, because this has been like a 14-year battle in the courts with ExxonMobil. So on June 30th, A federal court upheld a $14.25 million penalty against ExxonMobil's Baytown refinery for decades of Clean Air Act violations dating all the way back to 2005. So this case started with local activists. They came together and filled out citizen enforcement petitions after emissions reports were ignored by Exxon. And it's really a landmark victory that shows that communities can use legal tools to enforce environmental regulations. Now the EPA is reviewing national refinery enforcement protocols based on this particular outcome. So it's triggered a review of federal policy, which I think is fantastic. So moving into the bad category or the bad story of environmental legislation and enforcement, the Break Free from Plastics bill has been stalled in the Senate. In June 2025, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which would have established mandatory bottle deposits and recycled content standards, it failed to pass amid intense lobbying and political opposition. So supporters say the bill would have created a cohesive national framework for plastics recycling, and the opposition is arguing that it's too costly for producers to comply. So with the federal bill just kind of sidelined right now, states are left to pass their own versions, and it's going to lead to fragmented regulations and policies. This is kind of what we call patchwork legislation, where every single state is putting in their own legislation or not. And then what's even more frustrating for the companies that have to comply is in some states they have to comply with these legislative standards, and then there are none in some other states. So it's very state centric or state focused right now, instead of having a national policy that could have had a more blanket effect, which is what the producers are really pushing back on. But yeah, I think a national policy would be great. Here in Texas, we got our bottle bill pushed through the furthest it's ever gone in the Texas legislative session. And we ran out of time, unfortunately, on this bill. I've been part of the bottle bill legislative push for the 5 previous times. And keep in mind, in Texas, we only meet every other year on odd numbered years for 5 months. Maybe a couple of extra months if the governor calls a special session on a specific topic. But it's really a feeding frenzy here in Texas. And it takes about, at least 2, 3, 4 legislative sessions to get a particular piece of legislation pushed through. And so the bottle bill has seen this here in Texas, where it would be a deposit and return system like you see in Hawaii or Michigan. But again, it got the furthest that it ever has in any previous legislative session. And it got to the floor, but, for a discussion and a vote, but we just ran out of time in the calendar month back at the end of May. So it will be back. And if you live in Texas and you want to get involved in bottle bill policy to help push it through and see it through to the finish line, I absolutely encourage you guys to get involved with Texans for Clean Water. And any of the other, plastics pollution nonprofit organizations that are working on this particular piece of legislation in Texas. It's very exciting, but it's been quite a letdown, unfortunately, seeing as the time ran out and we were getting pretty close. So let's move on to the ugly story in this category, which is, legislative policies and enforcement. So the ugly is plastic plants are discharging untreated toxins with no consequences. So back in 2024, Environmental Integrity Project they sent out a report and found that 70 U.S. plastics plants are discharging nearly 12 million pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus, plus over 74,000 pounds of 1,4-dioxane, often without any water quality limits or enforcement. So the EPA's permits haven't really been updated in like 30 years, and violating the Clean Water Act, mandates, especially impacting communities of color. They have not had to be reviewed, these permits. So environmental groups right now are suing the EPA and several states to force updated limits, where, Global Plastics Treaty Conference in Busan is pressuring legislators into taking action. So it's not just here at the local level, or at the nonprofit level with Environmental Integrity Project. It's not just at the EPA level, federal level, or state level. This is international as well. So environmental groups are really pushing them to update their policy limits to reflect what the plastics treaty conference in Busan is pushing for as well. So they want to kind of mirror that. So, from repair cafes rescuing broken items, and for food recovery apps to redistribute meals, to court decisions enforcing environmental law, we've seen how action creates change, but systemic fragility, labor inequality, and pollution loopholes still undermine this process and progress. So I have some zero waste action plan steps for you specifically. At home, you want to hone your repair skills, or maybe find a repair cafe in your local area. If you don't have one, start one. Maybe you can work with your local city or library branch to where you can host these fix-it clinics. At least that's what we do here in Austin. We have fix-it clinics, and they're at the local library branches. So, and that's through the city. So it's a partnership that you can approach your city council members with, that they might be able to get behind. And then that helps you bring together the community of those older tinkerers who know how to put these things back together again, as well. So it can provide, repair, keep things out of the landfill, bring the community together, and give those who are in older generations kind of a reignited purpose around tinkering. So you can also, at your own home, avoid single-use food packaging in food deliveries, or just cut down on your food deliveries altogether. How about that? And then make sure, if you are composting, compost correctly. So you want to make sure that you only have certified materials that can go in your composting bin. And what I mean by that is making sure that there are no plastics or any other type of recyclable materials, no trash. If you're doing a yard, kind of like a side yard composter that has a turn or a crank or something like that, something that's a lot smaller, you can make sure to just put in food waste that does not contain meat, bone, or dairy, because those little side yard tumblers just don't get hot enough to break down those types of proteins. Now, if you have an industrial system, like a cart that you roll out to your curbside, or maybe you have composting at your apartment, check with your city, or whoever the hauler is, to make sure that you can probably put in meat, bone, and dairy, because those industrial facilities, they get really, really hot, and they can break down those types of proteins. So I would double check first, but you definitely don't want any varmints coming around your side yard whenever you've got your compost bin full, because things aren't breaking down properly as far as meat, bone, dairy. Now, if you are at work, you can host a repair shop pop-up. So you can also subscribe to community repair efforts as well. But if you want to lead the charge in your at your workplace, you can work with your managers or supervisors to see if anybody wants to bring their old broken lamps or curling irons or jewelry or whatnot. See if we can set up kind of a repair shop where people can bring their stuff in, and other folks can work on doing the repairs for you as well. You can also push for reusable kit options in cafeterias and events. So think about those little pouches where you can slide in your bamboo or your stainless steel fork, knife, spoon. I've got one that's bamboo, and it's got a little Velcro flap, and it's got chopsticks in it as well. So you can push your your kitchen staff or whoever's running the kitchen staff to see if that would be, if that would be something they would make available to the customers at the food permitted business that you work at, or in your employee cafeteria if it's some kind of office environment. And then you can use the City of Baytown's their case study to advocate for corporate environmental sustainability. So you don't need to recreate the wheel. You can make sure to do better as a company. You can use that case like, hey, we don't want to pay $14 million to local advocacy groups because we're screwing up the environment. Let's get ahead of that. Let's be better. Let's have better policies, greener policies, more efficient operations. Let's have zero waste and circular economy instituted in our operations. So you don't want to be an ExxonMobil in a Baytown, and you don't want to have to defend your pollution in front of the EPA. So it's important to get out ahead of that, of course. Now, in your community, you can support fair pay for sanitation workers for systemic resilience, and make sure you're not a Philadelphia where all of your trash and your recycling is going to the curbside and not getting picked up for a week. This is what's happening in Philly right now with the sanitation workers strike. And there's just a large pileup of trash on sidewalks that's becoming a total blight on the city. And it's not something that is going to attract businesses or tourists to the area. So, fair pay is really critical for all city workers. Fair pay is also critical for workers at companies that are maybe private companies that are sanitation haulers and processors as well. So, that would be a kind of an internal thing whenever it comes to how much a company is paying their workers. They would need to kind of advocate for that internally. But if it's a city-run program, you can push the city lawmakers who are taxpayer funded by you. You could push them for better conditions, higher wages, better benefits, especially, working if they're unionized in your local community, you can work to support the unions as well that are going after these better contracts for their workers. And you can also campaign for federal recycling infrastructure, like bottle bills. Look in your own state. Just Google bottle bill and then the name of your state. If you don't already have a bottle bill on record in your state that's operational, but maybe you want to get involved in the bottle bill fight at your local community, nonprofit that might be taking on the statewide issue. I would say go for it. We've been fighting it for 10 years, more than that, in Texas, and we're close, but not quite there yet. So it takes a lot of heavy lifting from the recycling community, a lot of heavy lifting from concerned citizens and businesses that want to be on the right side of history whenever it comes to supporting this type of legislation. So you can also back lawsuits. You can do sign-on letters or sign petitions that would force the EPA to hold plastics plants accountable as well. So think about those plastic plants that are operating under 30-year permits that haven't been updated. So, asking the EPA, what are you doing to update these plastic plant pollution standards, and then also, knocking on the door and digitally, through emails or social media posts about, to the actual plastics plants about what they're doing to curb pollution. They're probably going to come back and say, we're following policy. But again, those policies are very old. They need to be updated, and the companies should be going above and beyond to reduce their plastics pollution. So I have a couple of bonus announcements. If you're interested, my new Kindle ebook and my download is on Kindle. It's the Zero Waste Family, and it is a book that tells you how to reduce waste in every single room of your home, how to create non-toxic, organic, beauty products for yourself in your bathroom. It helps, you to help your kids learn sustainable habits. It also helps you understand how to reduce food waste for events and gatherings, especially around the holidays, and then low waste vacations as well. We cover that topic. So if you're interested, check it out on Kindle, called The Zero Waste Family. You can also join my monthly Zero Waste business newsletter on LinkedIn for expert strategies to reduce waste in your business. And then you can also subscribe to our new Substack account for deep dives, Q&A sessions, behind the scenes stories. And then in the social media description for this particular video, I've got a link for a free download, which is the 9 ways to close the loop. So if you think about the linear economy that we're in, where you take raw materials, make them into a product, and then those products get used up, then dumped. That's very linear, right? So what we're wanting to do is to take the two ends of the linear economy and create a loop so that those materials are constantly being reintroduced into the economy to make new products that show up on our store shelves. So there's 9 ways to close the loop is the download for free. You can get the link in the description of this particular video. And if you did find this episode helpful, like it, share it, comment, tag someone who you think will care. And then I will see you next week on environmental news, the good, the bad, the ugly. Stay empowered and keep fighting for a zero waste world. I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.